On August 25, 2026, the world said goodbye to Dolly Parton, one of the most recognizable and beloved figures in American entertainment. She was 80 years old. For more than 6 decades, Parton had been a singer, songwriter, actress, entrepreneur, cultural icon, and philanthropist whose influence reached far beyond country music. But the way news of her death reached the public was remarkably personal. Instead of beginning with a traditional press conference or a carefully staged announcement, the news came through her family. Her nephew Brian Seaver, the son of Dolly's sister Cassie Parton, and a longtime member of her security team, appeared in a video message to announce that his aunt had died. Seaver explained that Dolly herself had asked him years earlier to deliver that message when the time eventually came. He had worked as her head of security for more than 2 decades, following his father Larry, who had held the position before him. That detail makes Dolly's final goodbye feel unmistakably like her. She had spent her entire life turning personal experiences into stories, songs, characters, businesses, and acts of generosity. Even when she was preparing for the one moment no performer can control, she apparently wanted to have a say in how the world would hear the news. The family's message was accompanied by a simple farewell from Dolly. "I will always love you." Those words carried extraordinary meaning because they echoed one of the most famous songs she ever wrote. "I Will Always Love You" began as a deeply personal song written for her professional separation from Porter Wagoner in 1974. Years later, Whitney Houston transformed it into an international phenomenon. Now, those same words became part of Dolly's own final farewell. The circumstances surrounding Dolly's final days also help explain why the announcement came as such a shock to millions of people. Her health had become a growing concern during the year before her death, although she repeatedly tried to reassure the public. In 2025, her sister Frida's request for prayers sparked widespread alarm online. Fans began speculating that Dolly was seriously ill, and social media quickly became filled with exaggerated claims and even disturbing AI-generated images suggesting that she was near death. Frida later clarified that she had simply been asking people to pray for her older sister because Dolly had not been feeling her best. Dolly then responded in her own unmistakable style, with humor. She publicly reassured fans that she was still alive, still working, and still determined to continue. At the time, Dolly's message was comforting because it sounded exactly like the Dolly Parton people knew. She acknowledged that doctors had found health issues that needed attention, but she emphasized that she was not ready to stop. She had already experienced tremendous personal loss after her husband, Carl Dean, died in March 2025. The two had been married for nearly 6 decades, and their relationship had remained remarkably private despite Dolly's extraordinary fame. Dean died in Nashville at 82, and the family announced that he would be laid to rest in a private ceremony attended only by immediate family. Dolly later wrote that words could not adequately describe the love they had shared for more than 60 years. Carl's death was not simply the loss of a husband. It marked the end of one of the most private and enduring relationships in American celebrity culture. Dolly had spent most of her professional life surrounded by cameras, microphones, stages, awards, and millions of fans. Carl chose almost the opposite existence. He stayed away from the spotlight, rarely appeared publicly with her, and maintained a life separate from the entertainment industry. Their differences were part of what made the relationship work. Dolly could be one of the biggest stars on earth, while Carl remained comfortable outside the public eye. Their marriage survived fame, constant travel, enormous professional pressure, and decades of public curiosity. After Carl's passing, Dolly continued working, even while acknowledging that grief and health challenges had changed her life. She remained involved in music, business, philanthropy, and creative projects. Her determination became one of the defining themes of her final years. She did not behave like someone ready to disappear. She continued thinking about the future. She continued creating. And she continued speaking about projects that mattered to her. That is why the news of her death felt so sudden to many people. Dolly had spent years teaching her audience to expect another song, another appearance, another joke, another project, another surprise. But behind that public optimism, her health difficulties were becoming more serious. reports published after her death said she had faced significant medical problems in the months leading up to August 2026. Her representatives confirmed that she had experienced a brief battle with cancer, while other reporting described complications involving her health and a hospitalization shortly before her death. The precise medical details were not publicly disclosed, and her family asked for privacy. That privacy is important because Dolly Parton spent much of her life understanding the difference between being famous and giving the public access to everything. She shared plenty with her fans, her childhood stories, her struggles, her ambitions, her music, her humor, and her beliefs. But there were boundaries she protected. Her marriage was one of them. Her family was another. And her final moments were no different. What the public does know is that Dolly died in Tennessee at the age of 80, surrounded by the love of the people closest to her. Her death immediately triggered an extraordinary wave of grief. Country singers, Hollywood actors, politicians, business leaders, writers, and ordinary fans all began remembering what Dolly had meant to them. The tributes were not limited to Nashville or the United States. Her influence had crossed generations and borders. That reaction makes sense when you consider just how much of American culture Dolly touched. She was not simply the woman behind Jolene, 9 to 5, and I Will Always Love You. She was an actress who became a major film star. She was a businesswoman who helped create Dollywood. She was a songwriter whose compositions became classics in the voices of other artists. She was a television personality, a performer, and a cultural figure capable of reaching people who did not normally listen to country music. Her career expanded across generations, allowing grandparents, parents, and children to recognize the same unmistakable personality. Yet perhaps the most powerful part of Dolly's legacy has little to do with record sales or awards. It is found in books. In 1995, Dolly founded the Imagination Library through the Dollywood Foundation. The program was inspired in part by her father, who could not read or write. Instead of allowing that painful fact from her childhood to remain only a memory, Dolly turned it into a mission. The Imagination Library began sending free books to young children, eventually expanding far beyond Tennessee and reaching communities around the world. By 2025, the organization had passed the extraordinary milestone of distributing more than 300 million books. That number is almost impossible to comprehend. 300 million books means hundreds of millions of opportunities for a child to open a book and enter another world. It means bedtime stories, first words, new ideas, family reading time, and children discovering that books belong to them too. And it reveals something important about Dolly Parton. She understood that fame could disappear quickly, but the opportunities you create for other people can continue long after you are gone. That is why the request made after her death was so meaningful. Instead of asking fans to focus only on flowers, statues, or grand public displays, her family encouraged people who wanted to honor Dolly to support the Imagination Library. Her philanthropic work was never an accessory to her career. It was one of the foundations of her identity. Even Dollywood reflected this philosophy. Following Dolly's death, the theme park announced that it would remain open, emphasizing her wish that the park remain a place of joy, hope, togetherness, music, and shared dreams. The message was simple. Mourning Dolly did not mean stopping the joy she had spent her life creating. That idea may be one of the most fitting ways to understand Dolly's legacy. She came from poverty in the Tennessee mountains, but she never treated her beginnings as something to hide. Instead, she transformed them into the emotional foundation of her art. Songs such as Coat of Many Colors carried stories of childhood hardship and family love. Her success did not erase where she came from. It gave her the ability to tell those stories to the world. And she never seemed interested in becoming distant from ordinary people. Dolly could stand beside presidents, movie stars, billionaires, and international celebrities, yet she remained recognizable as the woman who knew what it meant to grow up without much money. Her humor, her generosity, and her ability to laugh at herself helped make her unusually approachable. She could wear rhinestones and enormous wigs, dominate a stage, and still make people feel as though she were talking directly to them. That contrast became one of her greatest strengths. The glamorous Dolly and the humble Dolly were not two different people. They were the same woman. She understood entertainment, but she also understood human vulnerability. She knew how to make people laugh, but she also knew how to write about heartbreak. She could build a massive entertainment empire while remembering a child who simply needed a book. Her final goodbye reflected that same balance between spectacle and privacy. There was no need for Dolly to turn her own death into a public performance. Her family said a private service would be held according to her wishes. That decision was consistent with the way she and Carl had handled the most intimate parts of their lives. When Carl died, his family also chose a private ceremony with immediate family. For a woman who had spent more than 60 years under the brightest lights in America, there is something powerful about the idea of her final moments being quiet. No stage, no cameras, no audience, just family. And perhaps that is the part of Dolly's story that people will understand more deeply with time. Her public life was enormous, but the person at the center of it always belonged to her family, her faith, her memories, her music, and the people she loved. Her death also leaves behind an unusual challenge for the people who admired her. How do you remember someone whose influence was so large that almost everyone has a different Dolly story? For some, she will always be the country singer who wrote Jolene. For others, she will be the voice behind 9 to 5. Some will remember her from movies. Others will remember Dollywood. Some will remember her appearances with younger generations of performers. And millions of parents will remember her because a Dolly Parton book arrived in their child's mailbox. That may be the most extraordinary thing about her life. Dolly Parton did not create only a career. She created connections. She connected country music with pop culture. She connected generations of listeners. She connected entertainment with philanthropy. She connected childhood poverty with a worldwide literacy movement. And she connected one of the most recognizable faces in the world with the simple idea that success means more when it can be shared. The world will continue listening to her songs. Actors will continue performing her characters. Dollywood will continue welcoming families. The Imagination Library will continue putting books into children's hands. And future generations will discover her music without ever having experienced the era in which she first became famous. That is the strange thing about death for an artist like Dolly Parton. The person is gone, but the work becomes even more permanent. A song written decades ago can suddenly feel like a message from the person who wrote it. A photograph can bring back a smile. A child can open a book carrying Dolly's name without knowing that the woman behind it once grew up in a tiny Tennessee home with very little money. A visitor can walk through Dollywood and experience the joy she wanted the park to represent. And somewhere, someone who has never heard Dolly's voice before will eventually press play on a song and discover what millions of people already knew. Dolly Parton was more than a country legend. She was a storyteller who turned hardship into art. She was a businesswoman who turned dreams into places people could visit. She was a philanthropist who turned personal memories into opportunities for children. And she was a woman who understood that fame is temporary, but kindness can become permanent. Her final message, "I will always love you," now carries a meaning that reaches far beyond the original song. It sounds like a farewell to the millions of people who followed her career, laughed at her jokes, sang her songs, watched her movies, visited her park, received her books, or simply admired the way she moved through the world. Dolly Parton spent her life under the spotlight, but her greatest legacy may exist far away from any stage. It lives in a child holding a book. It lives in a family telling a story. It lives in a songwriter finding courage to turn pain into music. It lives in an entertainer realizing that success does not have to make you forget where you came from. And perhaps that is why her farewell feels so fitting. She did not need the world to build another monument. She had already built something larger, a catalog of songs that will keep being sung, a place where families can keep making memories, a foundation that will keep sending books to children, and a legacy built not only on fame, but on generosity. Dolly Parton's story began in the mountains of Tennessee and grew into one of the most extraordinary American success stories ever told. She became a global icon without losing the humor, warmth, and humility that made people love her in the first place. Now the stage lights have gone dark, but the songs remain, the stories remain, the books remain, the dreams remain, and somewhere, a child is turning the page. That may be the most beautiful way to say goodbye to Dolly Parton, not by remembering only how brightly she shined, but by remembering how much light she left behind.